If you have a console, you have a gamepad. If you have a PC, you have a keyboard. Leverless fighting game controllers like Hitbox make certain inputs so quick and consistent that some people say they provide an unfair advantage. So why do many fighting game players still spend their money on arcade sticks? When I asked on Blue Sky, Mastodon, YouTube and Discord, one word that came up a lot was tactile. And this makes sense. Why do car nerds, who drive not just to get somewhere but for the pleasure of it, prefer using a gear stick over gear shifting paddles or automatic transmission? It's a more engaging, visceral experience. The satisfaction gained from grabbing that stick and yanking it around is worth the sacrifice of a bit of convenience and efficiency for a lot of enthusiasts. For some, that experience is tied up with tradition or what they grew up with. For years, fighting games were an arcade-first genre. Some people like reading paperbacks instead of ebooks because of the smell, the feel of the paper. Maybe those help evoke nostalgia for time spent in libraries and secondhand bookshops. If part of the fun of fighting games is remembering the good old days, a more arcade-authentic experience might be part of that for you. The satisfaction of pulling off something difficult on stick and the hype of seeing others do so makes it more appealing to some fighting gamers than more efficient input alternatives. There's also the aesthetic element and the satisfaction of collecting, customizing and building bespoke arcade sticks. If someone comes round to play chess or backgammon, I don't want to put an iPad on the table between us. I want to use a nice board and pieces that might reflect my taste, or lack thereof. And there can be practical factors too. Going back to cars, a simple indicator stalk makes it super easy to know by feel and sound that you've clicked it into the right direction to signal your turning intention, as opposed to flat, touch-operated buttons which can feel frustratingly ambiguous. Hey, did you know there's an indie fighting game where you fight as cars? The activation zones on a controller D-pad can frustratingly lack feedback. Especially as a noob, I find myself asking if my input is too slow to activate a special move, or did the diagonal just not activate on my D-pad? With a stick, there are switches that you can hear and feel as they activate, making it crystal clear that the problem is indeed entirely with my own bad execution. To be clear, on this channel we believe that all controllers are brilliant. If you're having fun with a controller, that's a great controller. This video is about fight sticks, but there are good reasons to play with all kinds of stuff. I use a vertical mouse for work and I like the natural handshake position a stick gives you, but many prefer the ergonomic comfort of buttons that don't require you to move your wrist. Personally, I started off with gamepad, and that's what I've used for 99% of my time in fighting games. As a kid, I played on a PlayStation 1 controller because that's what I had. And when I got back into the genre as an adult, I started off with a PlayStation 5 controller because that's what I had. I've played with a few different gamepads and even a tiny bit on keyboard, but I've always wanted to try stick and see what it's like. So last year, I bought this 8-bit Do arcade stick secondhand. I opened up a game I had never played before, Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, and nothing seemed to work. It felt so awkward and different. I gave up and went back to pad. A few months later, Rubbish released a video called The Uneventful History of the Fireball, where she said,
"The slowest possible return for a valid fireball input actually comes from SNK's 1999 titles, Garou, Mark of the Wolves."
Immediately I decided that I would use this game to try to learn stick. Straight away, after only 6 or 7 months of procrastination, I wiped the dust off my arcade stick, installed Garou and jumped into training mode. I've been playing a lot of Street Fighter 1, so I was already in the rhythm of getting frustrated trying to do fireballs and dragon punches. I decided to stick with Marco Rodriguez, also known as Kushnud Butt, a large Shoto character. I like Big Butt's familiar moveset and inputs, and with
a whole 1.1 seconds
to input a special move, I was finding it surprisingly straightforward in training mode. Hopping into the arcade story mode, my bubble burst. Of course, I didn't have my head around the game's mechanics, the movesets of the opposing characters, or even any combos yet, but worse than that, my moves just weren't coming out the way I intended them to. It turns out that taking
a whole 1.1 seconds
to input a quarter circle and a button isn't going to work when there's a sexy pirate ready to kick your butt while you're still in the middle of waggling your stick. Plus, it's hard to land a special move like this off the bat anyway without it getting jumped over or just defended. Single player Garou is extremely forgiving. After losing a match in arcade mode and choosing to continue, you can choose to make the game easier in one of a few ways, including starting your opponent on only a quarter of their full health. But I didn't want to just cheese my way through to the credits, and to be honest, I was still occasionally losing a round against a CPU opponent even after giving them that massive health disadvantage. I needed to learn a little bit more. Mark of the Wolves doesn't have many built-in learning resources, but it came out a quarter of a century ago, and there are plenty of old game facts guides and YouTube videos, plus a community keeping the game alive. I found a few recommended beginner combos that start with a jumping kick followed by a dragon punch, and decided this would be a good combo starter to practice to help get used to the stick. On practice mode, I set the dummy to block after the first hit. This means if my DP lands, it would be a true combo. If the dummy manages to block my DP, I have left too many frames after the kick so they could get out of hit stun and start blocking. At first, I was hardly landing any DPs. It seemed like I must be doing my inputs too slowly, and I did try to do them faster, but there was a lingering doubt. Maybe I'm just doing something else wrong. I asked for help in the Garou Mark of the Wolves Discord, and someone called Gigatempest told me that I was indeed being too slow with the DP and that I needed to buffer it and complete the input just as I touched the ground to cancel the landing recovery. There must be something psychological about having this confirmed, because it basically boiled down to do it faster, but somehow the reassurance that this should work, plus the information about why it works, made it more doable for me. It's also a testament to the power of community, or just having someone to talk to when getting into these games. Back in training mode, almost straight away I was landing DPs more often than not. Okay, my execution was still far from perfect, and sometimes the DP would be late or come out as a punch or fireball instead, but I had a tiny combo I could somewhat reliably execute. Time to test my might against the CPU in arcade mode again. And I still sucked. Turns out it was hard to even land the jump-in kick without getting anti-aired. Who would have thought? Sometimes as well, in my rush to do a move, my execution would just fall apart. When I'm rapidly trying to do 2 or 3 quarter circles to get a super out, I would sometimes end up jumping or dropping the input in another way. But to be fair, that happens to me on pad as well. In most ways, I find it easier to know what direction I'm inputting with stick, especially finishing a DP input on the diagonal. With pad, it's easier to overshoot and end up doing a quarter circle input. But not all my inputs are consistent on stick. Sometimes I struggle to jump diagonally to the left and would end up jumping straight up. It is still early days for me on my stick journey, and while I won't be using it 100% of the time, playing Switch in bed is just much more convenient with the Hori Split Pad Pro, for example, I will keep using the fight stick, and I'm sure it will come more and more naturally to me with practice. I've approached this in quite an unstructured way, just making it up as I go along, but I came across a video from a channel called Frozen Tea where they spent a week trying to learn stick with drills for stuff like Korean backdashing and Electric Wind Godfist in Tekken 8, as well as learning a combo in a different game every day. Following a structure like this might make more sense than my random approach if you're looking to get started with stick. Frozen Tea has more videos about trying fighting games as a beginner to the genre, so check out their channel. I do think it would be fun to have a go at learning some more complicated tech like Korean backdashing or maybe Zangief 360 and 720 inputs, so maybe that will be next on my list of things to try. I have a question for all you stick aficionados. I understand that the joystick in my cheap secondhand 8-bit do isn't going to be as good as a high quality expensive one from a more prestigious brand, but in the absence of being able to try one for myself, how would you explain the difference? What makes a quality stick a quality stick? And what's different about the experience of using one?